Hey everyone, today we're talking about why the housing market's broken and what that means for Washington. So, what's up everyone? Ronnie here. Today we're diving deep into something that touches nearly everyone buying, selling, renting, building, or investing in real estate. Specifically, we're asking why has housing become so brutally unaffordable? And maybe more importantly, what's really behind it? There's a lot of noise out there, headlines that blame Wall Street, immigration, or greedy developers. But I don't think those are the root issues. Stick with me. I'll walk you through what I believe is actually going on, especially here in Washington state, and what we could do about it. So I think number one, the perception versus the reality. What people typically blame, you see it all the time. Wall Street investors are buying up all the homes, mass immigration that's driving up prices. Developers are greedy and ripping us off. Interest rates are high, debt is high, so prices explode. There are some valid factors in many markets, but when you dig into the data, those explanations only tell part of the story, and often they're distractions that keep us from addressing the real structural issues. For example, yes, institutional investors do buy, but nationwide, large corporate investors still own a small share of all homes. Mostly, most investors are smaller owner occupant or mom and pop type buyers, or folks buying a second home or a rental. That means when someone says Wall Street is buying everything, that is often just a scapegoat. Same with immigration or demand. Sure, demand plays a role, but demand alone doesn't explain why almost no new housing is affordable for first time buyers. What I want to argue today, the bigger problem is on the supply side: regulation, zoning, land scarcity, building costs, and developer incentive structure that basically force the construction of big, expensive homes instead of affordable ones. Number two, I would say why homes cost so much more than back in the day, right? Like, let's go back in history for a minute, say to post World War II America, the 1950s. Median home prices then were around $7,300. When adjusted for inflation, that's roughly $80,000 to $90,000 in today's money. A modest home, bare bones, under 1,000 square feet, maybe two bedrooms, one bathroom, a small yard, no luxury finishes. Back then, land was plentiful, often cheap, especially in the suburbs or developing, exurbs. Builders could carve up farmland or outlying acreage into very small lots, high density, lots of low cost houses, rapid subdivision. The starter home was modest, simple, minimal amenities. Fast forward to today, the typical starter home people want, what they're willing to buy, is very different: bigger square footage, multiple bathrooms, garages, insulation, central heating and cooling, energy efficient windows, better construction materials, more amenities. In other words, what was once considered luxury upgrades are now baseline expectations. So, naturally, these expectations add cost. Land costs more, construction costs more, materials and labor more expensive, utilities, building code standards, amenity, all of that adds up. But that alone doesn't fully explain the price explosion. The real kicker, especially in sticky markets like ours, is regulation plus zoning plus fees. Regulations, zoning, and fees, right? The invisible price tag. Here's where things get messy and often underdiscussed. In many states, especially high demand regions, regulation and zoning add massive hidden costs that dramatically alter what kind of housing gets built and what ends up being affordable. Regulatory costs is part of the home price. According to the National Association of Home Builders, the average government regulation accounts for as much as 25% of the cost of a new single family home. And if we're talking multifamily, like duplexes, triplexes, apartment buildings, that percentage jumps to 40%. That means a substantial portion of what you pay for a home isn't land, materials, or labor, it's regulation, permitting fees, and red tape. And how this favors luxury large builds over small affordable units, because many are flat or fixed, meaning whether you build a small home or a mansion, you might pay a similar base permit inspection impact fees. Developers often make the economics work by building bigger houses, more square footage, per dollar. It simply becomes more cost efficient per unit. Small starter homes, modest apartments, or missing middle housing often don't pencil out under these conditions. And so, like real permitting nightmares, you know, they're out there. Okay, so for anecdotal experience, imagine the scenario. You're building a smallish unit, say 600 square feet, but local code requires parking, often 300 square feet per unit, and effectively increases the footprint and cost of per unit dramatically. Then you factor minimum lot size, setbacks, open space requirements, or landscape tree replacement mandates. Suddenly, you need more land, bigger lot, more materials, costs go up fast. Permitting process itself can add delay and costs. For instance, you might need multiple separate permits to dig a trench, permit for plumbing, permit for tree removal, urban forestry review, environmental review, and more. Each step adds costs and risk. Delays can be weeks, months. Meanwhile, workers idle, overhead accumulates, materials may rise. For smaller developers or investors aiming for modest builds, the math just fails often. So the result, many small scale projects never get off the ground, or if they do, they end up as luxury or high margin builds because that's the only way to make the returns work. And this is, you know, a big issue. So, why this is especially a problem in Washington state? Since I operate here in Washington, this hits close to home. So, here's what recent data says. As of late 2025, the typical home value in Washington is about 591,500. Now, I know it's a big state, but median sale list prices and real estate activity show a market that remains expensive but with slight cooling. Recent reports put the median sale price around 580,000 to 650,000 depending on region and housing type. Even with those prices, a large portion of households in Washington are priced out. One recent analysis estimates that only about 20% of Washington families can afford a median priced home based on typical income levels. To put that another way, about 80% of families are effectively excluded from homeownership at median prices. Meanwhile, demand remains high. Population growth is steady, but housing supply, especially affordable supply, hasn't kept up. Even though statewide housing unit growth since 1990 has been significant, a 67% increase, that roughly matches population growth, which is around 65%, meaning housing growth has only kept pace, not outpaced demand. In many cities and counties, local zoning and land use codes remain restrictive. Large lot minimums, single family zoning dominance, strict permit requirements, parking mandates, and slow permitting process, all of which discourage building more modest or dense housing like duplexes, triplexes, ADUs, or small apartments. In short, Washington has high demand, rising costs, and regulatory environment that favors high cost builders over affordable units. That is a structural bottleneck. So, what are the consequences and who gets locked out, right? Because, not everybody's affected by this, but so many are. So, because of these structural realities, first time homebuyers, especially middle income and younger people, often simply can't qualify for mortgage loans at median home prices. Their incomes don't match the price. Even before down payment, taxes, insurance, HOA, or maintenance, rental markets stay tight. Low rental vacancy rates across the state, especially outside the urban core, mean that rental prices remain high and affordable housing is scarce. The starter home has effectively disappeared in many parts of the state, replaced by either luxury builds or high margin houses, meaning the path to homeownership looks more like buy up immediately or rent forever. Wealth inequality tends to widen. Those who already have capital, down payments, equity, rentals survive the system. The rest struggle. Markets become fragile, housing bubbles, lack of mobility, generational lockout, shrinking affordability, which impacts not just individuals, but communities, workforce stability, and regional economic growth. I mean, this is like, I'm working with people who have great state jobs, and the starter homes that some of them are buying, it's surprising. Those when I was younger, and my friends' parents who were state workers, I mean, that was like they had a nice place, they were really set, and it's just not always the case anymore. So, what needs to change? Structural policy and builder incentives. If the goal is to restore affordability or at least widen the path to homeownership and reasonable rents, here are structural changes we should push for and I believe are realistic. Streamline permits and cut red tape. The permitting process needs to be simplified. Fewer redundant approvals, multiple permits for plumbing, digging, trees, environmental review, consolidate reviews, predictable timelines. The slower and more uncertain the process, the more risk. And that risk inflates to costs everywhere. Reform zoning and allow missing middle housing. Zoning rules should allow for middle housing types, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, small apartment buildings, accessory dwelling units, townhomes. These can significantly increase density with lower per unit cost while preserving neighborhood character. Modifying or eliminating requirements like large minimum lot sizes, mandatory large yards, parking, overly restrictive open space, landscaping mandates, reduce overhead per unit, and open up the option for smaller, more affordable units. We need to incentivize builders for affordable and modular housing. Offer tax breaks or subsidies for builders who commit to building small footprint, affordable units. Encourage modular or prefab housing options. Often faster, cheaper, and more efficient, prefab, flexible zoning, lower fees could dramatically reduce cost per unit. Create policies that favor supply over speculation and limit incentives that push for oversized luxury builds when land is scarce. Make housing policy a priority at the local and state level. Cities and counties need to re examine their land use plans, permit process, zoning maps, fees and structures, a lens towards what kind of housing the region needs, not just what is easiest and most profitable. Engage the public, homeowners, renters, developers around demand for affordability, not just value. Encourage policies that favor long term housing supply over short term profit or exclusivity. Those are just things that need to be done, you know? And what does this mean for investors, buyers, and everyday people, including you? Well, if you're an investor, real estate agent, or someone looking to buy, rent, or build, be aware the hidden costs, the regulation fees, the permit delays are as important as the land and materials. Factor those into any deal or investment decision. If you believe in long term value, then modular, small footprint, efficient housing builds may be the smartest bet. As long as regulation stays the same, big houses stay dominant. But if things shift, smaller units could become very desirable for first time homebuyers or renters. Don't assume the starter home you expect is going to exist. Realistic expectations, right? Like either you'll rent longer or you'll pay up significantly. That may influence whether you buy and what you buy. As community, pushing for zoning reform, permit streamlining, builder incentives, that benefits everyone because more supply at lower cost means more opportunity. So here's why I'm still hopeful. Housing is a solvable problem. This isn't some hopeless ideological rant. Housing affordability is solvable. And I believe with the right mix of policy, community demand, and building innovation, we can shift the dynamics back towards fairness and accessibility. Washington already has population growth and demand. That means developers and builders have a market if the rules change. Missing middle, housing modular builds, ADUs, denser zoning, these are real tools. They've worked elsewhere, and with thoughtful adoption, they can work here. If homeowners, renters, and investors start demanding affordable supply rather than just premium builds, that creates pressure on local governments to act. It only takes one or two incremental changes, streamlined permits, zoning adjustments, incentive programs to begin lowering the barriers. And look, I get it. Like, you've got to make sure this is done well and that it doesn't just open up a free for all, but where we're at is a bottleneck too, and it's causing housing to freeze. So I'd say like the final thoughts and a call to action, right? So here's the real breakdown. I don't think housing is expensive because of mythical Wall Street greedy overlords or massive immigration. I don't think it's just high interest rates or rising material costs. I think, especially here in Washington, it's a structural problem: regulation, zoning, land scarcity, and misaligned incentives. If we want to fix this, if we want housing to be something that people can realistically afford, not a pipe dream, we need to push for change. We need to demand streamlined permitting, zoning reform, incentives for affordable housing, openness for modular and smaller unit builds. And if you care about this, if homeownership, reasonable rent, fair access matter to you, then talk to your city council, contact your state rep, bring this up at community meetings, and share this conversation. Because at the end of the day, housing isn't just a commodity, it's a basic human need. And we deserve a system that treats it that way. Thanks for listening. If you're into this kind of deep dive, hit subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share this with anyone who cares about housing, investing, or the future of Washington real estate. Until next time,